And so the focus is, why is the client having this issue or this behavior or this problem? So why is he working so hard? For what part of the system is he working so hard?
Hi, I'm Paola, and I'm glad to have today with us Yvonne Lonis. She's a member of the Berthellinger Institute in Holland. And thank you for coming here and talk with me. And I would like to talk about a little bit about the systemic focus, the systemic coaching, and starting from actually what is a system.
All right. Well, that's a question that always arises. So when you talk about systemic, what is a system? And I think the easiest way to give that words is that if this is a system, and maybe there are two or more people, then in the other system it's different. So there is a distinction between this one and that one. There are different rules, different way of being or doing than in this system. So a system needs a distinction from each other. Mm-hmm. So there could be also like people judge each other. There's the we and there's the they.
Yeah.
So that's a system, in my opinion. Yeah.
So the focus of systemic coaching is to work with systems. What is the approach?
So it's different than, let's say, analytic or other ways of coaching. And in a way, it's not about the client or the coachee.
Yeah.
It's not about who or she is or he is. It's about what does he do for the system. So what is the function of the client in the system? And a lot of times the issue or the problem the clients have is about the function in the system the client has, but he's not aware of it.
Yeah.
So in systemic coaching you unravel the issue, the question, the problem with the coachee, and you place it in the functions of the maybe different systems, because we live in so many systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing that's important. It's not about who you are, but more about what you are for the system. And so the focus is, why is the client having this issue or this behavior or this problem? So why is he working so hard? For what part of the system is he working so hard? So the problem he has could be a solution for the system, because the system wants to be whole. And maybe the client has a function in there, not being aware of it, of course. And the problem then starts like, well, I don't have a good balance between work or my professional life, or why do I always look up to my boss, or why am I not in my strength? Why can my potential not flow fully? So that could be questions, and then we are not circling around what are you doing and who are you in having this question, but what are you for the system in having this question? That's one of the main differences for the systemic approach in coaching.
So actually it means that the focus and the interest is for the system.
Yes.
Not precisely for the request or the demand of the coachee or the client.
Exactly, not in the first approach. Of course, the client can benefit, but it can also be a tough truth to handle.
Yeah.
But then there is always a choice. When you unravel the function the client has for the system, then the client becomes aware, and then there's a choice. do I continue with all the prices and with all the values I get from it, or do I maybe do something else? But that's up to the client, not to me.
Yeah.
I'm just there to explore, to unravel, and maybe give some space, some movement, some first movement.
Listening to you, I'm thinking about the impact of this focus, especially in the business, in the organization, so in leadership. Because leadership needs this type of vision. How easy or how difficult or how important is the systemic view in terms of leadership, and how is the contribution the systemic vision can give to leadership?
Well, that's a big question. So I think if you look at leadership from a systemic point of view, you probably get different answers, or you probably get different focus. I think leadership from a systemic point of view is how much of leadership does a system need to flow, to flourish. And also here it's not about who, but it's about the functions in the system that provide leadership. And nowadays, and in Holland, we with the team of Bert Hellinger, we are really looking into the new principles coming up in the world, the new way of leadership, which is a lot of self-organizing teams. So we don't need much leadership. It looks that it's a new movement. So it's very interesting how much leadership does a system needs. And what we see from Constellation or working with this theme, that every system needs some kind of leadership. And we call it agents. So there has to be positions in that place. And it doesn't matter who or how long, but there needs to be some kind of leadership so the others can rely on it. They know somebody or something has my back, and then the potential can flow. Then there is flow in a system. So I think that's an interesting question, and in every organization or team you have to figure it out. How much of leadership do we really need, and how will we manage it?
Does it have some relation with the systemic principle of order, belongings and exchange?
Yes, of course, it always has. In a systemic point of view, that's what your focus is. You are looking where does those principles, where do they flourish, and where are they stuck, and when they are stuck, then patterns will arise. And so in terms of leadership, I think that's what I call agents. We have agents places in an organization and communio. And communio places are more for the binding, the holding in a system. And agents is more in leadership position. So you have, somebody has to be in touch with the outside world. And maybe get orders in, or because the system has to survive. So somebody has to do that, and somebody has to be in. There has to be a bind, a belonging in a system also. And so that's more a systemical approach than, like the diagram and what we know. So, and what we see in constellations, also in these new teams and these new forms of leadership, that the agents places need to be fulfilled. I once had a very interesting constellation with a network organization, and they said, we don't need leadership. We are a network and we are all professionals. So we did the constellation, and there was one guy, and he was the founder of the network. So in a way, they were talking like we don't need leadership, but somewhere deeper down, they were all looking at him for leadership. So when the constellation starts, he didn't want to fill in that spot, and everybody was looking, go, go. So, and that proves again that somebody has to be on that place. And if it's the founder, or if it's also an interesting thing we see is that now in these startups and in these new kinds of ways, there's a different kind of ownership also. It's maybe different from leadership, but also who is the systemic owner of the company. So that is becoming more and more important, not only the leader, but also who is the systemic owner of the company. And it could be the founder, but it could also be the idea that started the company. So it's not a person, you can't point to it, but it's the idea that came from the society or the need from society. And that could be the systemic owner, which is also important to know in a company for the flow.
Actually, I remember time ago in a conversation I had with Gian Jacob, that he was stressing the importance of what's happening outside in the world.
Yes.
For the reason to be and the survival and also the focus of any organization, no matter whether business organization, non-profit organization, institution.
Yeah, exactly.
What is your personal experience in putting this really in implementing this with real organization? How far people can understand this point of view, this approach?
Yeah. So when you talk with people like the founders or the managing directors, and you talk with them about this, about what was the main cause or the main movement that this organization started. So where was it connected to on a deeper level in society? So it's like the need of society. And if there's a connection, and normally it's so strange when you ask the question, and of course when you're not systemically trained, it's a strange question, but people know it, and they now I can give words, or now I can see what is so important, this gut feeling or whatever, how they describe it, but they know it. So then that's also, then they are in touch with that, well, how do you say, the current, the underlying current in society. And a lot of people are very in tuned with that, and then this new startups arise, and then it's very interesting when they grow. Then the people who started it, they move on, and they are again on a different current, and then that could be a scale up or not. But it's very interesting. It's a very different approach, but well, society doesn't. It continues. It has to grow.
And evolves.
It evolves, exactly.
So what type of real information we can get with a systemic approach?
Yes. So that's also a thing that people ask, and how does this work? And maybe in a simple way to put it is when you talk to a client, every client is attached to the Wi-Fi system, of the system.
Yeah.
So because he is part of the system, he has knowledge of the system, and this knowledge is not always known knowledge, but could also be unknown knowledge.
Yeah.
So I call it, like every part of a system has a connection with the Wi-Fi of the system without a password. So everybody has that if you're part of the system. And the information that will come to you as a coach when you are on a more systemic level, not when you're interpersonal. Then you have the cause and the effects, and which is also interesting, but it's not a systemic approach. So when you are more on a systemic layer, then you get in touch with the information the client has of the system. And this information could be about the principles and where they are stuck, or the things that happened in the past, not even knowing when they were there. It could be it happened 30 years ago, and maybe this employee is only 10 years in the company. Yeah. But everybody in the system has a knowledge, known and unknown, consciously and non-consciously, of the system. Yeah. And with a systemic approach, when you are more on that layer with your client, then you get an entrance in that for that information. And also, when you are in tune with the client, you can feel it in your body, or maybe you get some ideas or notions in your head, but then you are also part of the system through the client. So for a systemic coach, it's important to work on your, receiving of that information. Yeah. So you can ask questions, systemic questions that open the fields behind the client.
That are relevant.
Yes.
For the system.
Does this answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
The other question that is something that interests me especially is about values. And when I talk about values, I see them from a systemic point of view. Mm-hmm. As a person, we have a mission, mm-hmm. a function mm-hmm. in a system, mm-hmm. And we can be aligned with this or no. Mm-hmm. Is there any information or any integration with the systemic?
When you talk about values, for me then pops up, are you talking about leading principles?
Yes, what is important for me, for a person or for a group of people, because it's so important, it's so high in the scale of the interest that generates emotions, finally. So when an employee or a person is in tune with the leading principles of the company, well, then there is flow. Yeah. If the company knows, and that could be an inner knowing or a smart knowing, what the leading principles are, what is important to contribute to the world, to society, and if they have them in the right order, then and the employee who worked there has the same. Well, then it is a double flow. Yeah, it cumulates, and a lot of the times patrons attract patrons. So people come to companies because, probably there's the same values or the same leading principles they want to contribute. Yeah. But if not, well, then there is stuff going on. Then the flow is not smoothly. No. So that is something you can look in a systemic way. So what are the leading principles, and what is the order of leading principles? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's always nice to see in a family business what comes first. Is it the family or the business? Or is it business and then family? It both is possible, but when you know, and when the members of the company know, well, then it can flow. But if one says no, family comes first, well, then there's stuff going on, of course. Yeah. So values for me could be the values from the patrons of the company, which could give everybody wings to grow. But if the values and from the patrons from the company intervene with well, then you have a lot of stuff going. Issues, yes.
Issues.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne.